it's an honor just to be here in y'all's presence. And so I wanted to start by telling a story and end with a message. And the story is a very personal story, and it's a very recent story. And it's funny how things just sometimes fit. My parents were in town this last weekend, and whenever my father comes into town, he and we converse in Spanish. Spanish is my father's first language. He's a Mexican native. And so my father and I had multiple conversations in Spanish. And so we're at dinner one of the nights that my mother and father are in town, and my daughter, who's 7 years old, who I've been teaching Spanish, and she has Spanish at school. She asks me a question in front of my father, and she said, "Who taught you to speak Spanish, because you and Grandpa speak Spanish so well?" She said, "Did you learn it in school?" And I just nodded and said, "No, I learned it from my dad. I learned it from your grandfather." And so she asks my father, she says, "Grandpa, where did you learn to speak Spanish, because you speak it so well?" And he said, it's my language. I grew up speaking Spanish." And she said, "Why would you grow up speaking Spanish when everybody else speaks English?" And he said, "It's because when I was your age," she's 7, he said, "I was in Mexico. I was going to school in Mexico. My brother and my sisters were in school with me in Mexico." And so what I did, after we had dinner and everybody went to sleep, and my parents went back to the hotel where they were staying, because I have a 3-year-old little boy and nobody can sleep with him in the house, so they rented a hotel. I got up my computer and I began typing out just some notes, some things that my father had told me about his journey from Mexico to Texas, to West Texas. And I began typing those notes out, and I realized that there were a lot of gaps. There was information that I didn't know about the journey and about who my father is when it comes to his story. And so the next day, when my parents came back and my father and I had an opportunity to visit, he filled in some of those gaps to the story, but there's still many more gaps. I'm very fortunate, however. My grandfather is 89 years old and he's still alive. My grandfather is still in West Texas, and Spanish is the only language he speaks. He does understand some English. So when I see him, our full conversation is in Spanish. And I'm heading to visit them the first week in July, and I have my list of questions of the gaps in this story I need filled in. But this is a story that I know. And my encouragement to you here is, write your story down, because had it not been for my daughter, my 7-year-old daughter, asking the question about how my father learned to speak Spanish so well, and why when he comes to visit I speak to him in Spanish, if that conversation hadn't occurred, I might not have began writing down the story, my father's story. I might not have began putting that to paper. And perhaps if the question wasn't asked, my family would have lost that story. We would have forgotten where we came from. And so I encourage you to write that story down. And so these are the things that I know. In December of 1959, my grandmother and grandfather were seated at the dinner table, and they were barely able to feed their 4 children. So they had to make a decision if they were going to continue to try to eke out life in Mexico, or if they were going to make a bold journey to a land where they speak a different language, where they don't understand the customs, where they don't know how things are done. And so they decided to say, we're going to take a journey. We're going to take our 4 children, and we're going to go somewhere where the language that we speak isn't the predominant language, where maybe we'll be welcomed or maybe we will not be welcomed. So they did. They packed up the family. They took what they could. They filled out the paperwork for a worker's visa, and they came to the United States in 1960. My father was in the 5th grade at that time, and Spanish was the only language he spoke. But as opposed to be put in the 5th grade with other children his age, at that time, things were a bit different than they are now. He was put into the 1st grade. because the assumption was his inability to express himself in English must correlate with his inability to comprehend things. And so for him, he finished the year in first grade, and towards the end, they decided they'd move him back to the fifth, but by that point, my father felt lost, isolated, and ostracized, and so he began working at the age of 12 with my grandfather on the ranch as a ranch hand, as a cowboy. And so my father did that up until he was 18 years old. When he was 18 years old, he joined the United States Army. He joined the Army during the Vietnam conflict and served for 2 years, earned the designation of sergeant in the Army, and was a combat engineer, and was honorably discharged in 1970. So he came back to the United States in 1970. He held down odd jobs here and there, and he realized that the only way that his children, my brother and I have a brother who's 3 years younger, were ever going to have an opportunity in the United States that would entail more than working with one's hands, and there is honor in that, was for us to pursue a good education. And to make that a possibility, we had already, I was born in 1974, and so in 1980, my father decided that he would take another risk, just like his father had. And so he went to the bank with a business plan, and he said, I'm going to open an oil field construction company. I'm just going to buy one truck, just one truck. That's all I need. And he'd saved up all his money. And for somebody who is in his status, he didn't have a bank account. And so he had to save up his money. There was no credit. So he goes to the bank and he applies for a loan. And as he's filling out all the paperwork, he hands him his honorable discharge from the United States Army, showing that he had served with distinction. He showed him that he was a sergeant and that he was a sharpshooter, and all of his ribbons. He brought him with him. And the bank said, well, this is very nice and well, but you're not a U.S. citizen, so we can't give you a loan. And so my father left the bank and enrolled in courses to become a citizen. Now, this is a man who served in the United States Army and was honorably discharged, and wasn't allowed to get a bank loan because of that. And so he went back, and he had a choice. He could have become disgruntled and said, well, that's fine, I'll just go ahead and do what I've been doing. But instead he said, no, I'm going to go and I'm going to enroll in these classes. So he enrolled in night classes, and he studied to become a U.S. citizen. And so then later, in 81, he completed his courses, and in a ceremony that will take place later this morning, he raised his hand, and he became a citizen of the United States of America. And so, from that point forward, when I think of the word patriot, I think of my father. And when I think of an example, I realize that he was the foundation, and that I get the blessing of being the cornerstone for my family, because my daughter, who has never known the sacrifice of her grandfather, of her great-grandfather, is now the beneficiary of those two men and women and others involved in their lives that made sacrifices so that I could be here speaking to you, so that my 7-year-old daughter could attend an elementary school and have the luxury of learning Spanish as a second language and asking the question and wanting the story told. And so I encourage you all to write down your stories. Write them down either in a sacred book at home. Keep them somewhere. And don't lose those stories, because as I mentioned, had I not been asked by my 7-year-old daughter, I might have lost the story I just told you. And there's still so much more to that story I need to know and I need to fill in to create the narrative. And I plan on doing that when I see my grandfather. But for the families that are here today, I'm honored to be in your presence. I am truly honored because you are that foundation for your children, much like my father and grandfather were for my brother and I. You're that foundation, and the students, the young people today who will become U.S. citizens, you are the cornerstone. You are the cornerstone to the future of your families in this country. And a cornerstone is a very important stone because it bears the weight of the building. And without that cornerstone, the walls cave in. And you must be a strong cornerstone. And the only way to fortify yourself is with a good education and good deeds and good work, honorable work. And so, as an educator, as a son of an immigrant, as a first-generation American, I'm saying to you, I'm saying to your families, that truly, truly, whatever opportunity it is you seek, with work, with perseverance, and the dedication that has brought you here to this point today, should you continue that, anything and everything is available to you. We look forward in TUSD to serve and help facilitate your dreams so that what it is you aspire in your heart and your minds can become a reality. Thank you.